Mickey Carroll is joining us in the studio tonight. Thanks very much for being with us, as always.
Liz, thanks for having me.
So this is a surprise.
Yeah, it surprised me. When our technical people called with the numbers, I said, no, do it again, do it again. No, really, I didn't believe them. But look, Doug Schwartz, and you probably know, Doug Schwartz, our poll director, does these likely voter scenarios.
Right.
His track record is impeccable.
Well, tell the viewers what this means. What is a leaner? What is a likely?
Sure.
Because I don't think everyone knows.
No. Likely voter, before the primary, early on, we and everybody else polled voters, registered voters. Then you come down to close to the election. Now, registered voters, most of them aren't going to vote. You know that, or a lot of them aren't going to vote. So what a guy like Doug does is a series of screens. You registered? You interested? How interested? Do you care about this candidate? How much? And there's a whole bunch of things, and then he puts all this into his Cuisinart and turns it on. Seriously. And
mental Cuisinart, you mean?
Mental Cuisinart. And comes down to a smaller group, a refined in the sense of, refined, like you narrow something down.
Right. Those people
and those are
likely.
the people who the statistics say are likely to vote.
Okay, and
of those, well, leaners are people who maybe they're likely to vote, but they're not exactly sure who they're for. So that my basic point is that Doug puts all this stuff together. He comes up with a likely voter scenario, a likely voter group, and the result is 49 to 43. Cuomo over Palladino in a Quinnipiac poll.
Right. Now, we should note that Rick Blasio was not included in this poll. You and I differ on whether or not that was a good idea. You've actually taken some heat for this.
Of course.
What was the decision not to include him? The man is still in the race.
The man is listed, but Liz, it appeared to me, and this is basically my call, let's face it, that Blasio was likely not to be in the race. We didn't know. So we figured what we know is Cuomo, Palladino. So let's poll what we know.
Now, granted, in the race on the conservative
it depends.
line.
But look, Liz.
No. They will run.
They'll have a name. If they have Blasio, look, they need the 50,000, right? They need him. And Blasio promised Mike Long, the conservative chairman, who's a good guy and a guy who you wouldn't want to mislead or wouldn't want to break your word to.
Correct.
Blasio promised him, yeah, I'll run strong. Now, Blasio broke part of his promise by failing to win the Republican primary. So what do you know? Okay, then what? Just the other day, Cox and the Republican leaders said you've got a moral obligation to the Republican Party. So he's got and it is a moral decision on either side. What does he do? If he decides not to run, and then they put a name on, they're not going to get the 50,000.
You know what's interesting here, though, is that you also talked about people who have made up their mind versus might change their minds, right? And it's 79-21. So 21% of people who
change their mind,
have made a decision could change their mind. But only 18% of people who are Carl Palladino supporters say that they'll change their minds versus 23% for Andrew Cuomo. Also interesting is the favorable unfavorables. 51-34 for Andrew Cuomo, 36-31 for Carl Palladino, but 31% say they haven't heard enough. That gives some entrance.
They'll hear.
Yeah, but that gives some room for Cuomo to define him, does it not?
But it also gives some room for Palladino to define himself. And look, he blew Blasio away in the Republican primary, partly because of the message, no question, but also regardless of the money. I mean, he spent a lot of money.
Yeah, about more than $3 million.
Well, he's not going to, he's not going to have that advantage over Cuomo.
No, he has $23.6 million.
They're both going to spend millions of dollars, so that we'll have to see who defines Palladino, Cuomo or Palladino. They'll both try, obviously. We'll see what happens.
You know what's interesting, though, is and we don't have the upstate-downstate breakdown here.
Well, and Liz, once again, somebody asked me about that, and I said, look, Quinnipiac yesterday was putting together Pennsylvania and New York polls. The technical people literally didn't have time to put that stuff together. We got it, and we'll give it to you. But I'm sorry, we won't give it to your viewers now because they just didn't put it together.
Okay,
we'll have it.
But the question is this. I mean, obviously, 93 to 94% of Erie County voted for Carl Palladino in the primary.
Yeah.
That's his home turf.
Yeah,
now,
it's also a Democratic area.
Yeah, but more conservative than, say, New York City. I mean, the New York City vote is where it's 5-to-1 Democratic enrollment in New York City.
Yeah.
If liberal voters don't feel moved to come out, And the upstate voters do feel moved to come
No,
out?
no, okay. That's what this Quinnipiac poll says, and you'll have CNN and Marist later in the week
I know, we'll be
either
polled out
argue
at the
with
end of
it
the week.
or you know what Lee Miringhoff calls it? He said, call it All Polls Day. Or
All Polls Day, I love it. All
But in
right.
any event, yes, depending. If a lot of liberals stay home and a lot of conservatives come out, then your next governor is going to be Carroll Palladino, sure. But how do we know what's going to happen?
We don't know what's happening.
Precisely.
Neither do we know if Rick Blasio is going to be in the general election,
We don't.
Mickey. I'm
Exactly.
just saying.
Okay.
I'm just saying. So what part of this exactly, though, it surprises you the most? I mean, because when
Well, what
most-
surprised me is the two things. The overall number just plain surprises me. I didn't think Palladino was
6-point
going to be
spread,
that close.
right.
Yeah. And the other one is look at the independent voters. The independent voters say they're for Palladino.
But that's not so unusual because we're seeing independents trend Republican
That's
nationally
true.
right
That's
now.
true. But the independents, the Tea Party people,
Right.
who had a big effect in the Republican primary, this independent cohort, about a third, 31%, I think, of our total, includes the Tea Party, but includes everybody else too. Everybody that says it's not a Republican or a Democrat. So, did I think that the independents were going to go for Palladino? No.
You know, interesting, today we see an independent, probably the most prominent independent in New York today is Mayor Bloomberg, and he's backing
Yeah.
Andrew Cuomo.
Yeah.
What kind of difference is that going to make, if any, do you think?
Who knows? Honestly, Liz, I don't know. This election, which many people thought, you guys, reporters, us guys, pollsters, thought was going to be a runaway. Well, it doesn't look like a runaway.
Not today.
So who knows? And the Lazio thing that you point out, that is a factor that we got to figure out what's going to happen. At this stage of the game, it's a reasonably close election. You have two candidates, both of whom are tough guys, both of whom have a lot of money.
What about this idea of Andrew Cuomo not engaging Carl Palladino? He just said again today, I'm not going to play gutter politics. I'm not going to engage in name calling. On issues, I'll engage on issues,
That's
but
what
I
they
won't
always
engage.
say. That's what they always say.
Okay, well, he's
I
tapping
don't
other
know.
people to do the dirty work for him.
Well, I don't know, but I know this. If I were Palladino, what Palladino has...
If you were Palladino, the world would be a different place.
That's
Mickey.
true, but I'm not. But Palladino is Palladino. He's not a dumb guy by any means.
No.
And he knows Andrew Cuomo's reputation as a guy with a temper.
Right.
So he's clearly trying to get under his skin. The gold chain business, the cojones quotes and stuff. He's trying to get Cuomo sore, angry, you know. And Cuomo, at least at this stage of the game, is being the statesman. But we'll have to see what happens. It'll be interesting. They can't let Palladino just get away with it. In other words, they're going to have to go after him. But the question is, who goes after him and how do they go after him? I don't know.
Did you cover Mario? I can't remember.
Sure.
You
Sure.
did, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think Mario's feeling about this particular issue? You know him.
I don't think anybody knows him. I think Andrew probably knows him, and maybe Matilda. Mario Cuomo is a very, very self-contained. I mean, he speaks a lot, talks a lot, says a lot of things, but what's in his head? Hard to say. He certainly he's a loving father, no question about it. And over the years, the few times I've talked to him since I've been a reporter, it's always Andrew pushing him.
Right.
And that is an honorable thing. You know, you'd expect a father to do that for his son. What does he think about this business? Who
Well,
knows?
the Cuomos are very big on loyalty, so
Yeah.
it will be very interesting to see who goes where as this continues to shake out. Now, when are you going back into the field?
Don't know, Liz, and that part of our problem is that Quinnipiac is a very busy place. The day we were putting out this New
Yep,
York
you
poll,
mentioned, yeah.
we were doing a Pennsylvania poll. We have good elections in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Florida, Connecticut, all of our
Well,
states.
nationally, you got a lot of good elections.
Yeah, well, nationally, the national election, it's not a national election unless the Democrats put their heads in the news and decide to make it a national election.
Sure.
But we're busy in all these other places. So we'll be back in New York, but I'm not sure exactly when or how much. At least a couple of times before the election. But
Okay.
it's tough to do. I mean, look at that Connecticut race. Hey, that's a peach.
Well,
Ohio,
yeah.
Florida, that's
Yeah,
all of
yeah.
them.
Well, we'll be looking for you. Of course, we will keep our viewers up to date with all of our polls and our pollsters. I want to thank you very much in the meantime for coming in.
Thanks for having me on, Liz, and I look forward to seeing you again.
It's always fun.
Mm.